And I went out for a walk one night in Allington with this fella. We went up, round the woods, Hermitage Way, up onto the Pilgrim's Way on the Downs. The moon was shining, it was a full moon. And I was talking about how creepy I find the nursery rhyme, girls and boys come out to play. By the time we got back to his house, he had convinced me that we were being followed by certain entities. He's here later, you can blame him. This is called Bright as Day. They say the first nearly killed her mother being born, and before the year was out, she was big with the next one. I suppose a wife has little say in such things, especially one too proud to send her shilling for a box of pills. Sickly she was, all through that confinement. And when that weak little thing slipped into the world with a mule as pitiful as a kitten saved from drowning, you would have thought neither of them would last the week. By the time he was a year, we knew that if a cold, a cough, a fit of fever went around, that baby would take it until his forehead felt like bubbling oil, until it seemed like the fluid in his lungs would drown him outright. It's a poor thing to wish another's life away. Still, at night, my pillow pressed fast against my ears, I wonder how it might have been had the mistress swallowed yarrow and gin enough with both of them. Sometimes it's better that way. Every woman knows of another with a garden full of tansy and pennyroyal. I knew half a dozen by the time this business was done. It would have been easier on the mother, at least. Not that she died. After the boy was born, she seemed to bleed away until any room she sat in was an empty place. Nothing I, nor the master could say, nor any doctor we hired could say, would bring her up again to play her part and dandle her pretty children on her knee. So I was nursemaid to them, alike as a pair of cherubs in a church window, only not so rosy. They were pale, and their hair would not take a curl for all the efforts I put into young madams. Well, his was just the same, hanging straight and lank. Their parents were dark, both of them. Perhaps theirs would have darkened as the years went by. Oh, there was something pinched and sickly about those two. The girl was better than her brother, for her cheeks held some blush, and her eyes were not that dreadful, faded grey. Oh, but perhaps it was the house that did it to them. It was a cheerless enough place after the young master was born. Before that, the mistress had kept songbirds, you see. She had loved to hear their pretty trilling. Afterwards, they starved in their cages without her so much as looking their way. Well, of course, the master tried to ply her with more, but when that failed, it was the maids who bore the brunt of her indisposition. I set my face to make it seem plain, and kept myself out of the master's way. My care was for the children. Now, I'd stood nursemaid often enough before. I know the way that it is usual for a child, no more than a baby herself, to take it when a new one is turfing her out of the cradle. Jealousy and tantrums. That is the way it should be, rather than the way young Madam would stand, watching her brother snuffle through fevered sleep as she sang her baby's nonsense to him, hour on hour. I would never have thought a child had it in her to stand so still, and I did not like it. Did not like the way her fingers smoothed the bed sheets, nor the way her mouth lisped out that babble. But the boy slept better, slept silent when she was near. A little mother to him, that was what the others said. They said I should be grateful. On nights when he was ill, and God knows they happened often enough, I would wake from my half-doze and see her leaning against the cot bars, her nightgown no whiter than her bare little feet, that cap of fine, pale hair. Nothing I could say or threaten would move her, not until her own mind was made up to creep back to bed. The master doted on her. The maids told me he had been the same about his wife. Well, we could all see the good his affection had done there. By then the other girls were casting lots, to avoid answering his ring. The mistress did not heed it when he called her name. Who was left, then, to experience his fondness? Those children, though. Oh, true, they were not always running and troubling me with scraped knees and cracked heads. True, they would not argue the way children do. Thin little things they were, but they grew year on year. There was something in the hollows under their eyes, the unsmiling way that they would stare, that put me in mind of a street waif, yearning for a decent meal. And they would not suffer you to part them. As soon as he could stutter out the odd word by way of language, they would whisper as they wandered. Hands clasped or crouched down over some business I could never get close enough to see. He would follow after her, his invalid's toddle to her more steady step. I would watch them pin butterflies to cards, or tug snails from their shells, or pass their dolls and tops, forwards and back, for quiet hours. One day, their mother's song thrush was found spread about its cage, neat as a chicken jointed, leg and breast and wing. They had not a word to say about it, and no one had been in that room but them. Worse business came. When the weather was not too damp, they would take their games into the garden. A dark place, since neither the mistress nor the master had the heart to reshape the tuppery of the ewes. A graveyard shade, that was how it felt, and they would dawdle there for hours, scratching in the dust and needles. I thought little enough of it at the time. The young master was always a sickly one. Many nights I would stay awake, listening to the wheezing draw of his breath, his sister's quiet songs. My chair would rock, and one night it seemed as though one of the floorboards had come loose beneath it. The creak of it seemed to trouble him, so the next day, when they had carried him downstairs so the doctor might hem and haw and shake his head, I took some nails to fix it. As I pressed, the board came away. That is what remains with me. They had not troubled themselves to hide it better. Yellowed and fragile, wrapped in strands of hair, the bones were scattered without shape. One hand hovering, I knelt, my voice surging in my throat, ready to take the mess downstairs to the master and tell him all the devilment his children had been cooking. But that was when the door opened behind me, when I saw their starved little faces. He, the sick one, the one they said should not be standing and walking on his own, did not move. He stood, white and spiteful in his fever sweat. His sister flanked him and gave her head the tiniest of shakes. Spare the rod, they say, and you will spoil the child. The master would let no one hurt his babes. Well, I nearly gave my notice that day. His study was a great, wide-windowed room, and in it my eyes dazzled. I had not seen, before that day, how the rest of the house sank in shadows and gloom. Seeing the sunshine in the streets, it felt as though I had spent years living with an autumn chill. It was summer. The night would scarcely have its darkness. My hands were full of tiny, crumbling bones. Well, a childish curiosity, he said. Well, I told him what it was, that it could only be a baby's skull. Impossible. Children collect all manner of strange things, and no doubt some moles, perhaps a fox. I did not quite dare tell all the maids who had hastened away to meet some ailing aunt how such little bundles had been seeded in the garden at night, with it being so empty, so dark and green. Instead, I asked, did he not think it strange that they should spend their days cloistered so? A brother and a sister, so very close in age. Touching sentimentality. And once again, the charge that I should have gratitude, that I should thank my stars I was not harrowed with quarrels, with jealousy. That night, I woke to see young Madam at the foot of my bed, her eyes fixed upon my face. She sang, high and terrible, "Leave your supper and leave your sleep, and join with your playfellows in the street." But they had no playfellows. After that, there was something of mockery about them. Oh, I dressed them and I watched them play. At night I laid them in their beds, but I did not like to look on them. Either of them. There have been rumours since, unkind things said about my part, but I did nothing of the sort, did not anything wrong. Except, perhaps, that omission of affection. Except, perhaps, that small neglect. Perhaps it was my unease that led the young master to stray. They found him in the street, curled and sleeping against the garden's high wall. The dew upon his hair glittered in the summer moon, and nothing anyone could do would wake him. How he had left his bed, how he had crept past me as I lay asleep, I never asked. All I know is that when we returned him to his bed, he fell into a fever. That at the peak of that fever, he vanished once again. We did not find him that time. The master took it hard, took on the look of a man struck in the stomach, his shoulders hunched and his back bowed. He would not own that the boy was dead. He made them search and search again. Below the stairs we shared a thing that was not grief. The master stopped his forays among the maids who, it seemed, had neither giggled nor gossiped for many years. The little girl, she never shed a tear, never changed the games she played. At night she would not stay in her own bed, would stand by his as though he were not gone. When her lips moved, they did not make a sound. We were troubled by foxes. Every morning there would be sad little bodies, robin redbreasts, rabbits, cats, their throats all worried and torn. One afternoon, I watched two maids draw back the blinds left at half-mast since the boy had gone, and as the sunlight touched the room, we found all the colours faded, as though the fabrics, the carpets, the walls had all been soaked in bleach. Then came the failing in young Madam's health. Her hair hung lank, her face looked smudged with ash, her eyes bled out their blue until she was the spit of him, the vanished one, so chill and thin. She took a fever. The doctors came, but could not help. Well, it seemed to strike us all in some regard. Our fingers grew stiff with tiredness or damp. For all that the evenings remained long and bright, shortly after noon we would find a need for lamps. Every night there was any scrap of moon. Young Madam would be out of her bed, bare feet on the floor, singing, "Come with a shout, come with a call." But it was not her voice I heard, and her lips moved without a sound. Far down in the street there was another smudge of a figure, all glowing white. Then, one morning, the girl had gone. I went to give my notice. As I did, I saw the shadows had crept into the master's study like the fall of dusk. She had been gone 3 days. The streets and hospitals had been searched, and the quiet unease began to cut down to the bone. "Well, what if they return?" he said. What use to say they had gone into the darkness with their nightgowns and their bare feet? What to say of the torn bodies of birds and cats on the doorstep, of the way you must press your pillow to your ears to block out the high coaxing of their song? They drew at you, like a hook through your throat. It went through, if I went to the window, they would smile with white and glowing teeth. At night, I buried my face beneath the pillow and failed to sleep. "I dream of them," the master said, the light in his eyes like fever. "Little angels, all dressed in white. Their voices sing so clear." His hands clutched the back of the chair until his knuckles were white. "They will come back for me." When they found his body, it was tired and grey, slumped out behind the garden, leant against the wall. They said it was the foxes that had been at his throat. He had left his study windows swinging wide open. The dew had crept in and lay thick on a carpet that had been bled white. I should have gone then, but were I to leave this house now, they would follow me. Besides, the world has no place for a nursemaid who people whisper against, nor employment for a woman with pale grey hands and the drawn, lost eyes of age. In the darkness, I recall her gloating stare as I looked up from the skeleton they had hidden. Below the stairs, the maids are crooked back, as brittle and frail as the stem left when the fruit is long since rotten. The mistress is like a lily, turned to paper in its vase. Fewer of us. Fewer. Every year. This town has a plague of children lost, children strayed. Its mornings come with bodies mauled by foxes. And sometimes you will hear singing in the night.